So we're just going to give a minute or so for folks to come in from the waiting room. So welcome to the latest offering in the Gender Equity Education series. We're so glad to have you with us. I'm Ann Doherty. I'm the Gender Equity Liaison with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the College of Medicine, and I'm the chair of the Gender Equity Steering Committee. For those of you who have been with us for some of these other late fall sessions, you'll know that we've been talking about allyship, and I'm going to offer a definition of allyship for everyone. Allyship is an active, consistent, and arduous practice of unlearning and reevaluating in which a person in a position of privilege and power seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group. And this can be applied broadly. Here we're talking about allyship in terms of gender equity, but it can be applied to any marginalized group. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge one of the Larner College of Medicine's strongest allies for equity and inclusion, and that would be our Dean, Dean Rick Page. And so I'm going to invite Dean Page to say a few words of welcome. Dean Page.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doherty, and congratulations on putting this together. I'm here just to say hello and thanks. And we've just had a wonderful 15, 20 plus minutes visiting with our speakers today. And I'm looking forward to hearing their words of wisdom. This is such an important area, and I'm grateful to Dr. Doherty for her leadership. I'm now just going to say, be well. I wish I could see all the people who are here listening in. This won't always be this way, but for the time being, I'm glad we have this technology for us to assemble to talk about this incredibly important area. And I'm now going to go silent here, and I'm delighted to have blocked off this hour to listen and learn with the rest of our community. I want to thank Dr. Doherty in advance and our speakers in advance for what I know is going to be an outstanding program. Stay well, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dean Page, and thank you for your ongoing support for gender equity at the College of Medicine. I am so excited about this session. Our panelists today come to us from The Ohio State University, where they've run the NSF-Funded Advocates and Allies for Equity initiative since 2016. This is a university-wide program that they've been running. And the initiative focuses on transforming the climate of the institution by enhancing men's engagement in gender equity work, with a long-range goal to change the university culture to become more inclusive and equitable for the faculty and staff women. Today, we have with us Dr. Rachel Bowen. Dr. Bowen is the Assistant Director of the Women's Place at The Ohio State University, and she is an Associate Professor of Political Science. We have Dr. Leon McDougall, who is the Chief Diversity Officer at The Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. He is also the Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at the Ohio State University College of Medicine and a Professor of Family Medicine. He also is the current President of the National Medical Association. We also have with us Dean David Williams, who is the Monte Ahuja Endowed Dean's Chair and the current Dean of the College of Engineering at The Ohio State University. We're so happy to have all of you with us and look forward to learning from you and with you for the next hour or so. And I would just say at the start that we will have, we do have a Q&A function, and you can enter questions there. We will have saved plenty of time at the end to go through those questions, and I'll be monitoring them throughout. So I'm going to ask Dr. Bowen to start us off.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. We are excited about the Advocates and Allies program. As mentioned, we have been running it for almost 5 years now. It got its start at North Dakota State University, but it is part of a multi-university NSF grant. And what I want to do with my portion today is tell you a little bit about how we run it and how a session works. So, generally, the Women's Place and the work of the Advocates and Allies program is inspired and really informed by some of the practices of the Art of Hosting format, the Art of Hosting Meaningful Conversations. So we usually start with a welcome, an icebreaker, and a check-in. Because we're in a webinar format, I can't ask you to put that in the chat, but we would normally in our now virtual sessions for Advocates and Allies ask everyone present to share their name, their role, and one characteristic of what they'd like to see happen with gender equity by 2025. So I invite you to just think of that yourself, maybe make a note of it to yourself, even though you can't put it in the chat. So as a general overview, as mentioned, the goal of the Advocates and Allies program is to transform the climate at Ohio State through men's direct engagement in equity work. And there's two groups of men who are engaged in this work in our program. The first is the advocates, who are men who are leaders and accept the role of being leaders in this program. They commit to education, they commit to continuing to meet and support each other on issues of equity, but also they facilitate conversations for men who will be and desire to be allies for gender equity. So allies are men who have participated in facilitated events. These are, when we were in person, these were 2-hour conversations for men led by men. I should say for male identified persons led by male identified persons. And the allies at the end of these 2 hours would then sign a personal commitment to be an ally. And part of that commitment included some practical steps that they would seek to take part in. And in our virtual format that we've now launched, this is a 90-minute conversation and a little bit different format because of being on Zoom. The outcome is to build this network of supportive allies and related to that, to improve the recruitment, retention, promotion, and sustainability of women and underrepresented groups. We are now working to expand the program to have a component that's much more explicitly about underrepresented minorities. We have not yet launched that, but that's something we're very excited to hopefully launch in fall 2021. So a little bit of background. It began at North Dakota State with an NSF Advance Forward grant. They worked on it for about 6 years before applying for and receiving the Advanced Plan D grant. The Plan D grant included and expanded the program to Ohio State University and several other universities for a variety of reasons, including buy-in at Ohio State and some personnel changes at some of the other partner universities. It has taken off at Ohio State more than anywhere else, and we're very proud of that. Originally, it was male faculty who committed to personal action. As the program has expanded, we've also reached out to a number of staff leaders, and we now also have a number of staff units that have been through facilitations or are seeking to go through them. So it really is university-wide. This is the learning outcomes that we share at the beginning of a ally facilitation conversation. And I share this to give you just a sense of what we go over. Male privilege, implicit bias, understanding how gender impacts experiences, obstacles to equity, behaviors an ally should and can adopt, and how to find resources to continue developing individually as an ally and as a unit full of allies. In terms of how we run it, there is an advisory council of women who are often university leaders, although some of them are more informal leaders than they are necessarily titled leaders. And these women help to shape the curriculum, help to shape the format, and help to sort of update, and will be as the grant winds down and as we seek to update the program, we'll also be engaged in that update activity. There's also a cross-university coalition of advocates, and it's very important and has been very important at Ohio State that this has been a cross-university coalition. Although the program was initiated for the College of Engineering and at North Dakota State was very heavily influenced by the College of Engineering, at Ohio State, the College of Medicine's been very active, the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Science, the College of Social Work, lots of colleges. It's a very big university. And our largest college, the College of Arts and Sciences, is now in discussions to create a sort of pilot subgroup of advocates specifically for that college, which we're very excited about. And the Women's Place, particularly me and the rest of our staff, provide logistical support and leadership on this. The Women's Place is Ohio State's office that provides research and tries to catalyze policy change and culture change at Ohio State around gender equity. So in a facilitated conversation, we would supply some research and data on what is the status of women at Ohio State. This comes from research that is typically done through the Women's Place in our annual reporting. And we get these data typically from the Office of Human Resources. So as you can see, we report both the medical center leadership and non-medical center leadership. In a full conversation presentation, we would have multiple slides of data, but I'm just giving you a sense here. One of the most meaningful activities for allies and advocates who participate in these conversations is what we call the reading of the cards. And when it was in person, the people in the room were handed a couple of cards with a quote on them to read. So in the Zoom format, we're working on doing it as a direct message, which we're still working out the kinks on how well that will work. We hope it will be as effective. But these are quotes from individual women about things like, I was sent an email to please set up an appointment with my colleague because someone assumed that I was my colleague's secretary. Those kinds of quotes that often are very meaningful and enlightening for the men allies who hear them. So we close these sessions with several minutes and several activities around the idea that ally is a verb. And I really appreciate that quote and definition that opened today, that ally is a verb, not a noun. You can't just be an ally, you have to act as an ally. And a lot of that is around being intentional. And so we invite our allies to participate in aware, deliberate, conscious, intentional actions to be allies. And we also routinely meet with our advocates to try to develop and sort of troubleshoot what kinds of actions may be needed and how they may change with changing social environments. We also invite allies and advocates to consider the obstacles that they might encounter when addressing male privilege or gender bias. And this, I think, is really important. Too often we think in the abstract, you just have to say something. But if you haven't considered the backlash or resistance that you might receive when bringing up someone's privilege to them, then you are less likely to actually follow through and less likely to have a meaningful interaction with the person who you are bringing up their bias or privilege to. So that's my overview. We will certainly share the Women's Place information, but if you want to reach out to me, it's womensplace@osu.edu. And I will stop sharing my screen so that we can turn it over to Dr. Leon McDougall, who is in our College of Medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. So I'm going to take the baton and continue our discussion here. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So this is a wonderful photo of our Department of Surgery. Our department chair, Tim Pollock, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but he's right here with the gray suit on in the front, sitting, standing right next to the person that's kneeling. He has undergone the advocates training also, so it's really helpful with facilitating these discussions if there's a partner in that department. And so for the College of Medicine, we have about 8 senior faculty leaders who have undergone the training that Dr. Bowen referenced, and just wanted to share that with you. So this is my assignment for today. So first question here, how is the content and format different in the College of Medicine? In addition to some of the broader data that was shared by Dr. Bowen, I actually like to include faculty gender benchmarks and graduate medical education gender benchmarks within that particular department. And it's not uncommon that we can speak to an aspect of that that's actually a strength for a particular department. And so it's not necessarily always speaking to, you know, what haven't you done? Is, well, appreciate what you have done. We're gonna then focus more on how can we even continually improve in regards to our climate and culture and our respective departments. Also, what's different. So, and I don't know, Dr. Bowen, but for the College of Medicine, at least half of the departments, the female faculty say, well, we want to have our own session too. So in half of the departments, the female faculty, in other words, well, the males are meeting, what are we going to be doing? So we've convened a leadership sessions with the female faculty also. It typically focuses on career advancement, bringing in leaders and so forth to speak to that, whereas we more speak to the allyship and advocacy as Dr. Bowen reviewed here. Now, so next question. Approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion at the College of Medicine. So what I say to people all the time, any success that we have here starts from the top. And when I say the top, I'm speaking to the board of directors, board of trustees at the Ohio State University. They have a long track record of commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that lends itself to hiring presidents who have that high on their list of priorities, and then the presidents. And then for us, Provost McFerrin has just been wonderful, wonderful champion for advocates and allies. So that lends itself to cross-campus cooperation. We have 15 colleges at the Ohio State University. So having that top cover and having that leadership support is really critical, I think. And then at the dean's level, and it was so appreciated having an opportunity to speak to Dean Page. So the deans then hold the department chairs accountable. And I know at Ohio State we have a portion of the department chairs bonus is contingent upon diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in my role, I help share best practices, collaborate with Dr. Bowen with initiatives such as Advocates and Allies, and really leverage the expertise at Ohio State, including the Kirwan Institute on race and ethnicity. What departments have been reached? Let me get my cheat sheet here. So Department of Psychiatry, Department of Surgery, Family Medicine, Pediatrics, Emergency Medicine, Anesthesiology, Radiation Oncology, and there were 3 basic science departments signed up. That's before COVID-19 hit. So we're in development now of the virtual format that Dr. Bowen spoke to, and and there again, go with the departments where you know the term low-hanging fruit. So certain departments, they'll have leadership that are just more inclined to volunteer and see this as a value added. There are one in particular department I'm still working on, and it's one of our larger departments, and I just think it's just going to be a matter of time because, okay, so all right, I'm gonna put you all on hold here, and when I'm done with all 26 departments, or sometime then I'll come back to you and say, well, what excuse do you have now, right? So just making our way through the departments, and then for the last question here, what impacts have we seen so far? I'll go to the next slide, and so there's an exercise. And actually, you could probably go to this on your computer, put in gendered language in teacher reviews, and it compares, I think, over 14 million entries rating professors, and I put in words like smart, funny, and rude, and what you find is that the favorable attributes are favoring males. Rude favors female faculty. And this just leads to a wonderful discussion among the male faculty and administrators in the room. And this is kind of a brief summary of a recent discussion with this happening during the, not recent, but latter part, like February, and how the faculty shared with us. So these are male faculty saying this, that there is a possibility that some female faculty members may not be displaying their authentic selves in order to conform to perceived male model, right, on how professors should behave. And then there was awareness and discussion about how if female faculty members were not aware of this, that would also take away an opportunity for them to advocate on their behalf. So this is just kind of a snapshot of one of those discussions based on the content of the presentation. And then I'll end on this slide, which is part of those female faculty testimonials. The card to read like this: I worry about being viewed as incompetent if I leave early to attend a sick child. And you would think that this would be something really straightforward. Not so. All types of, I can remember having this discussion, and whereby the male faculty really didn't perceive the urgency of the situation, didn't consider that. So what happened is that a female resident put a sticker on his computer station. They were on an inpatient service, said something of the sort, sick child at home, or mom, child is crying, need to go home for sick child. And then the attending, since the person didn't make a verbal report out, really took offense to that and did not consider what else could be going on, and the discussion in the audience included, well, perhaps this has been an ongoing issue and perhaps this resident is really stressed out. Perhaps this resident is depressed. Perhaps you saying no as an attending was not an acceptable answer. So you have these discussions and allowing faculty to hear from their peers about what their response was and the lack of empathy that was really displayed here. And so that's just an example. So I think another outcome would be an opportunity for male faculty and administrators to reflect on their attitudes, especially after completing the implicit association test, which is also a part of this. And so that's just I think my 10 minutes are up. Now I will unshare my slides and turn it over to Dean David Williams.
Thank you, Leon, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you. My role is to give some background on the origins and the evolution of the program. So I'm basically telling a story, so I'm afraid you have nothing to do but look at my face rather than PowerPoints. The program started almost 6 years ago when Hazel Morrow Jones, then the leader of the Woman's Place, and the first associate dean who was female within the College of Engineering, persuaded me, David Manderscheid, then the Dean of Arts and Sciences, who moved on to be provost at the University of Tennessee Tennessee, Knoxville, and Bruce McFerrin, who was then Dean of the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences, who now has been mentioned as the provost of the university, to attend a 3-day workshop in rural Illinois. So 3 deans, 2 of us then executive deans, taking 3 days to attend what was then entitled the White Men as Full Diversity Partners Program. And the 3 of us landed at O'Hare, and we were in the car driving out to the middle of nowhere. And we each said to each other, Dave, I thought you'd be the first to say you couldn't make it. And I thought, Bruce, you were going to say that. So we were rather, how should I say, not convinced that this was the best way to spend our time. And on the drive back 3 days later, each of us said, wow, that's the most extraordinary experience that I've had in terms of educating me about white male privileges and the challenges of those who are not white males in the university system and beyond, since we shared our experience with corporate leaders and labor leaders, not just from the United States, but from around the world. The White Men as Full Diversity Partners name is to some off-putting, but the philosophy behind it is that we straight white male insiders step into the ring with each other and understand that true diversity and inclusion success cannot be achieved without those of us who set the rules and norms for organizations. So the experience uses the white male culture and our willingness to communicate in ways with which we are not familiar outside of our culture. And the format educates us on the dominance of the white male culture, makes us aware that we can only make a difference if we take the lead. And while we are not to blame personally for who we are, we must in turn recognize that because of our dominance, we are the ones most responsible for changing our own culture and embracing those outside, in particular in the experience I went through, women, Black, Brown, Latinx, and Indigenous peoples, and the LGBTQ community. Upon our return from those 3 days, appropriately energized, we took turns going around the university to meet with other colleges to talk about what we had learned. And so actually this is just another in a long range of sharing experiences about that formative event 6 years ago. So we work together as a team to encourage all the white male leadership across campus to attend a White Males Full Diversity Partners program. And within the College of Engineering, a significant number of the white male leaders did. It's entirely appropriate that engineering should lead, since traditionally we are the most, how shall I say, white male of all colleges in many, many universities. In particular, Rudy Buckheit, who was then my Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs, who actually appeared on one of Rachel's slides about the Advocates and Allies program. He took on the challenge of bringing the message to all our unit leaders, represent the college at the Advocates and Allies meeting, and begin to transform our faculty as we hired many, many new younger professors. Rudy moved on to be the Dean of Engineering at the University of Kentucky, and now we have actually the second Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs, who is a woman in the college. I've shared this program with the Big 10 plus deans and the engineering deans across the state of Ohio, 14 of us, and many others in those groups have taken up with the program. What's the impact? The impact is quite simple. We're engineers, we look at the numbers. There are 26 people on my executive committee, including obviously the various associate and assistant deans, chiefs of staff, fiscal, HR, advancement, and so on, and a dozen unit leaders, department chairs, and directors of schools. On that particular committee of 26, there are now 11 women, 2 Black members, 3 members of the LGBTQ community, and only 9 straight white males. In addition to my administrative team, where I have obviously direct authority in hiring, we have increased our numbers, particularly in staff and faculty, consistently through the years since I attended the White Men as Full Diversity Partners. And only this last week, I learned that while we are still in the final stages of selecting the next dean after my 10 years in this role, the 4 finalists are all women. So for the first time in 150 years, the College of Engineering will be led by a woman. So I think the impact has been very substantial. As always, a long way to go, but that would not have happened without Hazel's first reaching out to me 6 years ago. Thank you.
So I know now we're interested in hearing your questions and how we can, sort of more interactively tell you more about this program. So I know Ann Doherty was going to help to moderate those questions.
Yeah, so if we have a Q&A function on the bottom of your screen, and you can use those to submit anonymous or identified questions to our panelists, and I will be monitoring those. I think one of the things that's very interesting to me, and I think powerful to me about your program, is that it came from the senior leadership. And we were talking about that before the session started. There seemed like there were some key players who were voices for change and for progress. And I wonder if was there resistance below that, or did it seem like most people were ready to come along on the program? I know, Dr. McDougall, you were talking about some of the departments being harder to coax into the program than others. But what were the dynamics at the beginning?
So I'll speak to the College of Medicine, Dean Williams. I think he touched on the origins of the program. So the College of Medicine is more so with us having 8 senior leaders who have undergone the training and then presenting this opportunity during our college council and having support of the dean. So it's been more of a matter of getting things scheduled, and we spoke to this earlier about the low hanging fruit. Some department chairs are just more, it's a lot easier to get things scheduled and so forth in regards to these types of initiatives. So I'm making my way through our departments and collaborating with our other advocates across the college. And once we get our virtual format completed, I'm going to reach back out to our three basic science departments who had been scheduled for this past spring until COVID-19 hit, and just kind of make our way through. And so I think having the discussion with the department leadership and talking with them about how best would we be able to roll this out in your particular department is just mostly been that kind of one-on-one or leadership to leadership discussion. Now, I shared also too about how some of the, depending on the department, some of the women faculty wanted to have a separate program while we're doing this. So I think you have to be flexible in regards to knowing that, well, you may have a department that also wants to do a simultaneous program with the female faculty. So I think, you know, we didn't have any resistance to that. So, okay, well, how do we make that happen? It's not, you know, necessarily part of the National Science Foundation initiative, but it's something that was requested by some of the departments. So I think, you know, being open to that and meeting the department where they are at, I think that's important.
Great, thank you. So we do have some questions in the chat. One question is, what were 2 or 3 of the most difficult hurdles in getting folks on board? And then along those same lines, what recommendations do you have for engaging departments and faculty in the program?
One thing that I would say is that a lot of our requests come from faculty members at this stage, come from faculty members within departments. And so we do reach out to leaders, and I think Dr. McDougall's been really a leader in reaching out to all the department chairs. But throughout the university, we have actually a Qualtrics form that someone can go to the Women's Place webpage and say, my department could use this. Can you talk to me about whether or not we can set it up? And so it can come from any direction.
If I could chime in there, I found that certainly once the leadership gets on board and resources are made available, particularly for the hiring of a more diverse faculty, it wasn't a very tough sell within the engineering college. It was just blatantly obvious how unbalanced we were in our agenda and racial distribution. The challenge, particularly with faculty, is that we hire faculty for lifetimes, and the rate of change is appropriately slow. But I think within the last several years, 35% of our faculty hires under the age of 40 have been women, which is almost a doubling of the traditional distribution of women in the older engineering faculty. So it takes time, and you have to stay on top of it, period. Most recently, with the Black Lives Matter and racial injustice issues, we have recognized how far behind we were in hiring a Black and brown faculty. That's the next challenge that we have, but we know how to do it. So.
Another question is, do you have any suggestions for how another university can encourage leadership to take on this type of challenge?
So, Dr. Doherty, in our meeting before the meeting, I shared how, and Dean Williams spoke to this. So, from my viewpoint, our provost, McFerrin, was a real champion in this. So, having that top level university championing of such initiatives, that's very important. So, and with that authority and networking and leveraging that, and as Dean Williams spoke to, it also, I think, for us at our institution, we have a long track record of the Board of Trustees holding up diversity, equity, and inclusion as a signature value, and presidents that get hired at the Ohio State, if that's not in their portfolio, they don't get hired if that's not a priority. So it really starts from the top, and then you know the president, the provost, the deans. We have 15 colleges, the department chairs. Is a kind of a cascading accountability matrix. So that's it has to be a part of the fabric. If not, then someone would need to come in and drive change management. And I would again think that you would need that top level leadership to make that happen.
Again, if I may add, we have been very fortunate at Ohio State. The last 4 presidents have been a white woman, a white male, a black male, and another white woman, Christina Johnson, our most recent president. As Leon mentioned, the Board of Trustees is not just committed orally, but by their actions to providing leadership at the very top. President Johnson is openly gay, and that again adds to the diversity spectrum that we have at the university. So all of that makes it relatively easy for us white men to see what the leadership is doing and expecting, and then it carries on through the college, in my case, and the departments with relatively little pushback.
I would chime in here as well that sometimes as a practical matter, having the data to demonstrate is incredibly helpful. Climate surveys, or even, any sort of surveys or numbers on what the demographic makeup of faculty are, especially in comparison with other similar institutions, can be very persuasive when you can see where are we as an institution missing opportunities. It can be very persuasive with senior leaders especially.
And that is one of the questions that we have in the chat is, how are you tracking the success of the program over time? Does the Women's Place hold and curate the data? Is there a centralized place for data? And who can have access to that data?
I can respond to that. The Women's Place does the logistical sort of maintenance of the program. We're not always doing the scheduling. The Dean of the College of Social Work was until recently voluntarily handling the scheduling and logistics in that regard. But he's now become the co-chair of the university-wide task force on anti-racism. So he's far too busy to do anything else. But so we handle the scheduling. We keep an evaluation. We do an evaluation of each session, which the participants evaluate. We keep that data. We have a massive spreadsheet of everyone who's been through any of the ally facilitations, who the advocates are, how long they've been active, how many facilitations they've run. We are currently, because the grant is running out, we are looking at a more holistic process of looking at the assessment. And so in the next few months, we will be surveying people who've been through the allies facilitated conversations to see how they feel that it has changed their behaviors and their views on gender equity.
How have you evaluated benefits packages or policies that would benefit women that most universities do not currently offer? For instance, related to childcare, maternity leave, nursing support, breastfeeding, etc.
So I can speak to that from the College of Medicine standpoint. We had an equity assessment through the Office of Faculty Affairs, and what we discovered was that with some of the packages and starting salaries for female faculty, there was not equity. So that's being focused on now to, and the compensation plan includes that equity and the hiring when one looks at gender. Also, we've established a faculty experience team, and they've been working on a number of different initiatives from a standpoint of providing more equity in opportunities for our faculty. One of the measures included ensuring adequate opportunity for lactation availability, and then also when one would take time to do that, it was not taken away from their productivity. There was a measure to help ensure that that didn't lead to decrease in productivity when time was taken for such activity. And just an example of building into the daily work a provision to ensure that one providing service and care for one's family wasn't looked upon or amounted to a decline in one's productivity. So there are a number, and the group actually won an award from the university. There are a number of different provisions. They've been working and doing quite well in helping in that regard.
Another question, in addition to hiring and recruitment, what have you done to promote retention and successful scholarly productivity?
Perhaps I can address that since that's my responsibility ultimately within the college. That at the same time as we started sending men to allies and advocates programs and having them on the campus, there is an engineering leadership program at Drexel University for women who wish to become administrators within the college, and we have sent a group of our leaders to that program again over the last 6 years, and some of whom are now associate deans in the college and department chairs and so on. And each of the women leaders who comes back puts a program in place based on their experience at this. It's called ELATES. It's an acronym. I forget all the letters apart from the engineering leadership at the start. One of those programs is a mentoring program for women faculty that's now been going for 5 years. Mentoring of women by women leaders is particularly important for their retention. Specific attention paid, obviously, to maternity leave, suspension of the tenure clock, focusing on non-traditional issues like partnerships, joint publications, joint proposals as being the measure of success, because we find that women faculty are much more interested in joining with other faculty across the college and across the university, and the traditional male metrics of number of publications, research dollars, and so on are perhaps focused again on the white male values for success. So we try to change the factors within our evaluation criteria for promotion and tenure, and many other efforts like that. It's a question of being eternally vigilant rather than returning to the norm, which is what happens in complex engineering systems if you take the pressure off. So it's continuing the training, continuing looking at our criteria, reminding ourselves in everything we do that we measure our leaders' work in diversity and inclusion at every opportunity for pay raises and promotions.
If I could jump in a little bit, this is an area where I think Ohio State still has more work to be done university-wide, particularly in the retention of women of color faculty. That's an area where we've had a lot of difficulty moving the needle, and it's really the next big area that we need to focus on as the women's place and also university wide.
Would you be able to say any more, Dean Williams, about how you changed the measures of success or shift value from some more traditional promotion worthy pieces to other pieces?
Again, while I lead that, my Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs is responsible on a daily basis for doing this. And as I mentioned, Rudy Buckheit, who was in the one of our first advocates and allies, had the responsibility for doing that as a white male. After he moved on, Rachel Cleet, who is now Associate Dean, is driving the mentoring program in particular. And again, these challenges vary from unit to unit, so it's not something that we can do routinely across the college. The School of Architecture, white males are the minority in that particular school. Biomedical engineering, almost 50-50, male and female, and chemical and biomolecular engineering. And then you go to the other extreme in the more traditional aerospace and mechanical engineering, sort of boys with their toys history. So we find that there are different methods, different incentives apply in different units. Again, I think so long as we are aware of the cultures within different units, and we measure particularly the chair or the unit leader's success in recruiting and retention, particularly of faculty, then we find that things do start to change. Students are more difficult. The students are admitted to the university, not to the college. So our opportunities to diversify the student body are sort of rather vicarious rather than the specific actions we can take to hire faculty. So that's not perhaps as focused an answer as you might have liked. But again, the message has got to keep going out. We're teaching everybody, so we're telling them every year what we expect of them, and that is reflected in pay raises. So ultimately, perhaps that's the stick we have.
Excellent. Another question. A perennial problem with any program is reaching the people who need it the most, because the people that typically attend already embrace the issue. How do you reach the folks who need the program the most?
So I would say for the College of Medicine, having that strong buy-in from the department chair is critical. And the department chair expecting faculty, male faculty, to attend, this is an expectation. We want you to participate. So that's been very helpful.
I would add, though, that part of the philosophy of the program is that you should not be required to attend, and that if a person who does not want to be there is required to be there, they're liable to derail the whole conversation. And part of how those more recalcitrant individuals might be met is through the allies who then talk to them later in meetings and interact with them in the rest of their professional life. So yeah, that's always a challenge. And I would say, Dr. McDougall, I know we've talked about this quite a while ago, but that in the College of Medicine, because medical professionals need ongoing professional development, that you wrap it into that requirement, right?
Yes.
And going back to medicine as a specialty, one of the questions was, have you seen the effects of the program diffuse from the academic center or the College of Medicine side into the clinics and into the hospital? And have you seen any shifts on that side, not just for faculty or staff of the College of Medicine, but for everyone who's supporting the clinics and the hospital work?
So with the department chairs, and I think not too unsimilar to other medical schools, we're department-centric organization. So the department chairs have a lot of authority in the clinical realm. So we would think that the faculty and administrative leadership who are male becoming allies, that would be something that would extend beyond just the department meeting, or and since most of our work is in a clinical setting, I would suspect that this influence goes beyond the borders of physical department, because we're all over the place in regards to various ambulatory and inpatient care centers, and as you know, the faculty are the medical the faculty and staff, that is the medical center. So yes.
And having gone through the allyship and advocacy training and shaping this program, what aha moments have you had along the way? What were the big turning point moments or realizations?
Okay, I would say aha would be having that group dynamic speak to issues. So it's not just me as a diversity dean kind of talking down to or telling, well, y'all need to do this, that, and the other thing. We're just, as Dr. Williams and Dr. Bowen have spoken to, is sharing the data and specifically sharing testimonial from faculty at The Ohio State University and the experiences there, and then having the male faculty member comment on that and see how the peers interact with whatever response is given. So it's a peer-to-peer discussion. That's where a lot of the learning takes place, and even for example, you'll have, like, in one example, a junior faculty kind of like checked out and said, well, I'm only a junior faculty, it's not my responsibility. And then his peers saying, hold the phone, oh yes it is part of your responsibility. So it's that group dynamic, I think, that's most important, I would say.
One thing that I learned in the original program was that white men abhor silence. And whenever there is a slowing of the conversation in group meetings, it is white men who tend to leap in. So I have attempted in the subsequent years to always be the last to speak at my leadership meetings, unless called upon directly to do so. It's always been a great experiment to deliberately induce a silence and just see who leaps in first. And finally, in my own meetings, particularly with the gender balance somewhat righted, it's no longer the white men who always leap in first to fill the gap in the conversation. So an interesting experiment to start off with, and a very positive result coming out of it.
Well, this has been a really wonderful hour to spend. I feel like there's so much more to talk about. There are many more questions still in the chat, but we have to leave it so that people can get to their next event. I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Rachel Bowen, Dr. Leanne McDougall, and Dean David Williams for joining us. I hope that we're all fired up with new ideas to push ourselves closer to gender equity. And thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your time and your insights. And just as a reminder, the next session of the Gender Equity Education Series is December 9th in the noon hour. We will have Change the Story, a local nonprofit organization working on gender pay equity in the state of Vermont. And they're going to speak to us about their own allyship program, Male Champions for Change. So look out for an announcement about that, and I hope you can be with us. Again, thank you so much for spending time. Have a great afternoon and stay safe, everyone.